Hey, what's up? I'm Amanda. Welcome to Free2Disagree. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what's been going on, essentially, in my little political debacle that I call a life. A lot of people have been asking me why it is that what has happened to me. Like, oh, you've become a conservative, you've done all of this. Um, where is the hippie Bernie Sanders supporting Amanda? And I'm just going to kind of put it like this. So in 2016, I was supportive of Bernie Sanders, right? I predicted that Trump would win anyways because it was kind of obvious to me that the Hillary-Bernie kind of betrayal was going to happen. Either way, I supported Bernie Sanders in the caucuses here in Colorado, and I did that because out of the candidates that we had available, Bernie was at least an honest candidate for the most part that I could tell. These days, I don't so much think that anymore. I can get to that later, though. But in 2016, he had this natural energy that came to him, and this natural idea of like making sure that we're going to fight for civil rights. And all of my kind of like social movement in a liberal direction socially. I've always moved in a liberal direction socially, but I supported them for different reasons that I guess are kind of like outside the mainstream view. And so once I began to purport a reason why I supported something, it just became like this idea that nobody was really going to listen to me because the narrative that I had was already decided. And that's what I got on the right between 2014 to 2016 maybe. Yeah, 16 or 17. And then Trump becomes president. The day after he becomes president, I make a video and I post it on my Facebook and I said, I hope that we can all get along now. I hope that everyone kind of like comes back and meets in the middle and that we can reunite the country and praise Trump where he deserves to be praised and criticize Trump where he deserves to be criticized. And it seemed to me after that, the Democratic Party has just pretty much been running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to put out fires. And, back to my Bernie point, I supported Bernie because he was honest in my estimation and because I knew that the Congress was holding red. And if the Congress was holding red, it would at least start a conversation or initiate a conversation without initiating radical sweeping change. So kind of going back to where we are now in the elections, it's like Bernie Sanders is posting his lives of these rallies that he's going to, and I don't know if it's just me or what it is, but I look at Bernie Sanders' rallies and I am seeing cardboard cutouts of people fake robot clapping their hands, and I don't understand that it's not at all the ground momentum, energy movement that it was before. And to add to that, we now have democratic socialists, and many of them, not just one. We have many of them now in the House of Representatives. And obviously, I am now becoming concerned because for the last about year and a half, 2 years, although I have been distancing myself slightly from people on the left, I've also been trying to say, hey guys, this really isn't that bad. I have a lot of military friends on my feed. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. So I would often be on my feed like, hey, don't be calling each other names, trying to be this kind of peacekeeper. And now, we're approaching 2020, and I'm seeing a Trump presidency in 2020 because I don't see Democrats actually trying to hear anybody. They're just trying to keep running around trying to put out fires. So I find myself in this awkward position of kind of being thrown a message in a bottle from, my conservative or my deeply conservative friends. And I'm trying to have to take that message and translate it into some kind of leftist language that can be understood and then throw it to my lefty friends in hopes that we can facilitate communication from either one of the extremes. And it has become completely clear to me over the last since probably the midterm elections or just prior to the midterm elections, I was joking for a while saying, wow, winter is coming, the snowflakes are going to come get you, and I thought that it was kind of funny. But I did not exactly realize that AOC was really going to pull out. I didn't think that only 16,000 people were going to go vote in New York. And I find myself now in the position of trying to feel like I need to save the country from being burned, because now we've gone so far left that me in the center can't even be heard by anyone who's on the far left. I was in a female forum that was meant to empower women to talk about politics, and the owner of the forum posted up an article. I forget where it was from, maybe New York Times or something like that. But she posted this article, and it says, why AOC speaks truth to power. And and I find myself wanting to, scream, because I don't know what kind of women other girls looked up to when they were kids, but I watched Xena. I don't know if any of you guys know what Xena is. If you don't know what Xena is, you should look it up. But I watched Xena, or Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or, women who were different, who were breaking barriers, but who weren't trying to come in and change an entire system from the inside out on the very basis of this seems like it's a better idea. My issue is that a lot of these arguments are very surface level arguments. They're not connecting the real deep problems that are occurring in this country, the actual causes of our division, which I think is, I think Nietzsche had it right, and that, unfortunately, in American society, maybe God is dead for the majority, and if that's the case, and if that's what y'all want, then you need to be able to also establish some kind of community that can exist and still help each other without being dependent on something else. So, for example, what I mean by this is, if we're going to go back and talk about AOC for just a moment, or even Cory Booker, for example, proposing reparations. If you give people money, regardless of the reason you're giving them money, right? If you give people money, they become dependent on that income that's coming. And so anything else that they have, they take that, of course, but they also are going to spend extra because they have more, right? The more you have, the more you consume. And so, additionally, if the help that you're receiving is from some outside party, there's no way for the individual to do anything to repay that debt, and it makes you no longer obligatory to that debt. And I know that obligation is kind of like a debtor's word in a way, and it is. But there is something about the idea of a favor. So if money is a promise, or if money is a promise of a future favor, or if it's a value that is in a positive direction in your favor, it seems to me that what you're really going to want to do is repay that somehow, right? Because once you learn the idea that you can get something from someone, you also learn the idea that you can give it back, and that it can still be used by the other person. And so I think that we need to reestablish community ties that are more closely related to the ideas of what it's like to have a village raise a child in a way, not where other parents are telling parents what to do necessarily, but in the sense that if there was a 5-year-old walking down the street alone, you would feel comfortable enough that you live in a neighborhood in which you can trust your neighbors to check on the child and say, okay, we know that you belong to X family. Are you okay out here? Is this where you're supposed to be? Can I help you in any way? When you allow people to receive any kind of charity from an outside, unnamed source to which they have no obligation to whatsoever, the money that they receive has less of a value, has less of a utility in that way. If you value the money less, you spend it more frugal. You spend it more kind of frivolously on things that we don't necessarily need. And we find ourselves in this really awkward position of we have things, but suddenly we don't have enough to give to anybody else. And so you find that conservatives are giving more to charity, and it's because they have more to spare, because conservatives do what progressives do not. Conservatives plan for the future change, whereas progressives are trying to actually embody the change regardless of the full implications of the change. And I'm not even sure that everyone realizes kind of what's going on. So I'm hoping that through Free2Disagree, we can somehow make some communal sense and come back together and build relationships with each other that if they're going to be secular and if they're going to be non-religious, that they are relationships that are grounded in enough richness of caring about how the individual makes up the collective group, how it's your individual skill that makes you valuable. I want to get back to that idea to know that the individual is the sacred piece that makes up the whole, and that there is no whole without the individual. And so I guess I'll just kind of like leave it there, or leave it to you. Most women don't really agree with me on this because I find often that we end up clashing on, what's the best for the group. Perhaps like the group of women or this group of minorities or something like that. And I totally hear those arguments, and I would be even like more obliged, I guess, to hear those arguments from you. So if you really believe that collectivism is the way to go, please tell me why you really believe that, so that I can tell you why I really believe that maybe it's the individual. Because perhaps we don't entirely disagree, and in some instances we can use the idea of the individual, and in other instances we can use the idea of the collective without them having to be constantly at war with each other in the realm of identity and party politics. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys have an awesome Friday tomorrow and an awesome weekend coming up. Make sure you do your homework. I haven't been, and I need to get back on it. So you won't be seeing me at all this weekend. Take it easy, and leave the comments below. Share this with your friends. Have a good one.